BeamNG is empty. A very controversial statement, however, it is true. Even most of you agree with it. However, just because it feels empty does not mean that it is a bad game. In fact, it can mean quite the opposite, and that's what we're going to discuss today. Awesome, cool, super intro, yeah! You have probably not even noticed much of this first one. However, as the video goes on, I will discuss details that have a bigger and bigger impact on how empty they make BeamNG feel. However, the first one is ambient noises, a topic I have previously discussed briefly. However, I feel as though it is a key point because of course we have the oil rigs squeaking and creaking. However, think about in real life, stood this close to a city and it is just silent apart from the oil rigs. Last time I mentioned this, I suggested adding construction sounds around Belasco, which many of you were opposed to. However, I personally believe that it is a good idea given how much construction takes place in that city. A map I believe does this very well already is Jungle Rock Island, having heaps and heaps of ambient sounds across its vast rainforests. I mean, just take a listen to some of these sounds across the map. Way more vibrant and fulfilling than some other maps. Anyways, moving on to a slightly more impactful observation. This next point was mentioned in my Discord server, that being that BeamNG feels empty sometimes due to the lack of used farmland. This is most noticeable in Italy due to its vast farmscapes. However, not a single field has crops in it. They all appear to be ready for crops, but nothing, not even weeds growing in the fields. But as I promised, this video isn't just complaining about things in BeamNG. It's totally understandable that the devs have not added all this foliage for the sake of performance. I mean, Italy's already quite a big map, with lots of plants and trees and everything in between. Crops would just be overkill. I mean, we can see it on West Coast USA. There is no grass at all on Spearleaf Island due to the performance impact of adding a whole new island. Plus, if I'm being honest, if it wasn't for the person in my Discord, I realistically never would have noticed the lack of crops because the devs have constructed it so well that it doesn't actually feel that empty. Many people in the comments of the poll I showed earlier mentioned GTA a lot, comparing features it has versus ones they wish BeamNG had. I also noticed this myself. BeamNG does a great job of creating realistic looking streets, from skid marks, graffiti, or even some dirt. However, you're telling me a city like Belasco has no litter at all. I understand, once again, it comes down to performance management. However, I do still agree with these comments. Maybe even doing it like GTA does it, where you can add a setting that allows you to adjust the quantity of the rubbish surrounding the streets. However, let me know in the comments if you think BeamNG needs to have more rubbish. One other point I feel is very worth raising is that BeamNG only feels empty from certain aspects, such as the city life, as we have and will continue to discuss. However, if we consider how empty BeamNG is from the perspective of what the whole game is designed around, cars, then in fact BeamNG is overflowing with features, vehicles and game modes. Therefore, I have chosen to not go into too much detail about that in this video, as we all know BeamNG is a phenomenal car simulator. If there's one thing that we all have in common, it's probably the fact that none of us are exactly rich. And that's where today's sponsor, Eneba, comes in handy. That's right people, first ever channel sponsor. Now, I genuinely would never promote something I don't personally believe in, which is why I was actually excited to work with Eneba today. They've got massive discounts on loads of things we already use, from Steam games, console games, mobile games, and even software packages. Honestly, one thing I'll probably end up using myself is their Windows 11 deals once I finally get round to building my first PC. And as well, the highly anticipated Forza Horizon 6 is releasing very soon, so why not treat yourself to it for a fraction of the price? Because I think I just might. But not only is the website jam-packed with amazing deals, but it is genuinely one of the easiest websites I have ever used. It's so intuitive and easy to use. I can find exactly what I need, which is usually the issue I face on other websites. And I know you are probably thinking, this sounds way too good to be true. But Eneba does offer buyer protection, refund policies, and amazing customer support, which makes the whole thing way more trustworthy. And to even further show you how amazing this website is, I've hidden 3 mystery Steam game keys in this video. They can appear anytime after now. I'll give you the first one here, but remember remember, it's first come first served, so tell me honestly, why not use Eneba when you're still getting the game keys for the websites you already use, like Steam, but at a fraction of the price? It's a no-brainer. So, if you want to save some money on games or software, check out the link in the description or pinned comment. And a huge thanks to Eneba for sponsoring today's video. Next up, if you're enjoying, please consider liking and subscribing. Plus, have you ever noticed just how dark BeamNG is? Lots of people already complain non-stop about how the headlights are not bright enough when driving around at night, which is true. I personally drive with the full beams on the entire time just so that it feels a little bit more tolerable. However, besides vehicle headlights, the game is just quite dark at night. And I mean, I know, obviously, it's nighttime, but especially when looking around Belasco, it's extra dark. Not just because of the lack of streetlights, which I've also covered before. However, this is probably when BeamNG feels the most empty. I mean, just looking around at every residential block and building where there isn't a single light turned on in any window, it almost makes Belasco feel abandoned. I mean, don't get me wrong, the skyscrapers do have a subtle glow to them, along with very few of the houses. However, it's a very generic white glow and doesn't give that warm, yellow, lived-in feeling like a lot of games capture. On top of that, it's every window in the skyscraper, or at least most, which in reality would never happen. You would have the odd light or different colour LED, not an entire building glowing uniformly. However, at the risk of sounding like a broken record, I know this comes down to the performance impact. Having some windows glowing softly would add a huge performance impact, never mind trying to add streetlights to Belasco. This next one was brought up quite a few times by you guys, not just me, and that is the traffic density. I feel as though I always discuss Belasco City, so I find this most noticeable in Belasco City. Yeah, again. But since Belasco is BeamNG's biggest city, although we will discuss that more later, the amount of traffic that fills it feels tiny. I mean, even where I live in Aberdeen, we get more traffic, and it's a tiny city. Now I know traffic can be adjusted in settings, and that increasing cars also massively increases the performance impact. So what am I complaining about, you're asking? Well, honestly, nothing. I never said I'd have all the answers, only that I'm identifying things that make BeamNG feel empty, which this one certainly does due to the lack of physical density. But even if we could spawn in hundreds of AI cars and not crash our computers, I think the AI would seriously struggle. Like, I mean, the AI already struggles as it is, which I have an entire video dedicated to, so please feel free to check it out after this one. The second biggest impact to BeamNG's emptiness was commented by this person, and I think they're honestly a genius. I mean, many big racing or rally games have some sort of stock cheering sounds and 2D sprites with no collision bouncing around cheering you on as you fly into a tree at Mach 3, and I think this could add so much immersion to BeamNG's work in progress rally mode without doubling the resource requirements. Exactly as the comment describes, just some 2D bouncing sprites to make it feel like there are people and your race is more lively and, well, full. However, as another commenter mentioned, this should be kept to the rally mode, as I don't think pedestrians will ever suit BeamNG. I feel it would just be weird to drive around Belasco and have some sprite just staring at you, so I agree with keeping it to the rally mode. Finally, the biggest impact to how empty BeamNG feels, which, in all fairness, is being improved by the devs. However, it's the size and scale of the cities and towns across all of the maps. I feel like not only Belasco, but every town feels quite small. Obviously to keep the map's performance requirements lower, but however for me, this is one of the biggest factors in how empty BeamNG feels. I mean, going from docks to city centre in a few seconds really makes it feel small. Anyways, I hope you all enjoyed my second ever video essay. YouTube thinks you'll like the video now on screen. See ya.